The following presentation was originally given in 2007. The source video has been upscaled and the graphics have been upgraded to full high definition. We hope you enjoy this newly remastered version of this briefing package.
We're going to talk about Easter, the Easter story and what really happened. You know, when we talk about Christmas, most of us are probably well-versed enough to realize that most of what we know about Christmas are pagan legends. And that's pretty familiar ground. But it may surprise many of us to discover that what we have been taught about Easter is also full of misconceptions. And I'm not talking about the pagan name Easter. Obviously, the original Easter comes from the worship of Ishtar, Astarte, pagan rituals about the time of the vernal equinox, the spring equinox. But we use the term throughout our culture really to refer to the Christian holidays that derive really from the Jewish Passover. And it's astonishing to discover that even within the Christian context of using, aside from the label Easter, much of what we think know or what we've been taught about Easter are misconceptions, some of them very deliberate misconceptions. So we're going to explore the Easter story. And in part one, we'll get the background, and we'll explore some of these myths and misconceptions that plague us about the Easter story. What really happened? We'll talk a little bit about the myths and misconceptions, as setting a background for our second session where we'll go into the Easter story itself, what happened that Sunday morning. And so, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the reality. You know, one of the things that are shortcomings of Mel Gibson's famous movie, The Passion. It was, in many ways, quite a interesting project. Has a few Catholic overtones, but all in all, a very notable piece of work. However, it has two major shortcomings. The first is that it creates the impression that the crucifixion was a tragedy, when in fact it was an achievement. The specifications were laid down before the foundation of the world. It was a climax of a mission that Jesus came on this earth to fulfill. The second shortcoming of the movie is it doesn't get across who he really is. And it failed to identify the fact that we have the Creator himself become incarnate to fulfill a mission on our behalf. Those are two critical issues that we have to confront, especially around the Easter time. But there's a second aspect of the Easter story that may surprise you, and that is a deliberate separation by the church from the biblical text. And there is a strange word called the Quartodecimans, and we want to understand what Quartodeciman is. The term comes from the Latin. It means 14ism, and it's a term that was applied to Christians that insisted upon celebrating in accordance with the biblical text. The 14th day of Nisan is on the Jewish calendar, Passover, and it's 3 days after that the resurrection took place. And there were Christians in the early church, 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, that insisted upon following that practice. Interestingly enough, and they were labeled in these controversies that emerged as the Quartodecimans. And this was they clung to the Torah, the date of Passover, which was intended, expressed in the book of Exodus, to be a perpetual ordinance, and they were set upon observing them. Even as early as the 2nd century, we discover there are tensions brewing in the church. In 115 to 125 AD, the Roman Church celebrated Passover on the Sunday, not on Passover, at least since the time of Bishop Sixtus. And Eusebius records all of this. 154 AD, Polycarp visited Rome to settle disputes about this issue. And even Irenaeus wrote about it in support of the Quartodecimans in the 2nd century. However, in the 3rd century, the Council of Nicaea, most of us are aware of that pivotal council, it unanimously ruled that Easter festival should be celebrated throughout the Christian world on the first Sunday after the full moon following the vernal equinox. And that if the full moon should occur on a Sunday and thereby coincide with the Passover festival, Easter should be commemorated on the following Sunday, deliberately trying to worship on a day other than the biblical account. As a result of the Council of Nicaea, and amended by numerous subsequent councils, the formal church desperately attempted to design a formula for Easter, as they called it, which would avoid any possibility of falling on the Jewish Passover, even accidentally. In fact, the Quartodecimans, as they were called, were excommunicated. And that is actually astonishing in terms of the implications for the church. Those that were biblical were outcast. And the motives were very clear. In Eusebius' Life of Constantine, he quotes Constantine as follows: "It appeared an unworthy thing that the celebration of this most holy feast, that we should follow the practice of the Jews who have impiously defiled their hands with enormous sin and are therefore deservedly afflicted with the blindness of soul. Let us then have nothing in common with the detestable Jewish crowd, for we have received from our Savior a different way." Recognize that it was anti-Semitism in the early church that caused the church to lead the congregations away from the biblical text. In Theodet's Ecclesiastical History, he quotes the epistle of Emperor Constantine himself in his own words as follows: "It was in the first place declared improper to follow the custom of the Jews in the celebration of this holy festival, because their hands having been stained with crime, the minds of these wretched men are necessarily blinded. Let us then have nothing in common with the Jews who are our adversaries, avoiding all contact with that evil way." And he continues, "Who after having compassed the death of the Lord, being out of their minds, are guided not by sound reason, but by an unrestrained passion, whenever their innate madness carries them, a people so utterly depraved. Therefore, this irregularity must be corrected in order that we may no more have anything in common with those parricides and the murderers of our Lord, no single point in common with the perjury of the Jews." Shocking language. Shocking language. But to realize that the early church was so anti-Semitic that they altered their practices away from the biblical text and ushered in all kinds of confusion. That confusion still reigns today. They were under the Julian calendar, which had an astronomical problem, a discrepancy between the solar year and the lunar year, which of course drives the Jewish calendar. Had numerous alternatives for fixing the date of the feast, were tried by the church, but proved unsatisfactory. So the Easter was celebrated in different dates throughout the Christian world. For example, in 387, the dates of Easter in France and Egypt were separated by 35 days. So utter confusion is reigning, and it gets worse. About 465, the church adopted a system of calculation proposed by the astronomer Victorinus to reform the calendar and fix the date of Easter. Some of his methods are still in use, although a Scythian monk by the name of Dionysius Exiguus made significant adjustments to the Easter cycle in the 6th century. Refusal by the British and Celtic Christian churches to adopt the proposed changes led to a bitter dispute between them and Rome in the 7th century, so it continues. Finally, the Julian calendar gets reformed in 1582 in what they called the Gregorian Reform, and that eliminated some of the difficulties in fixing the date of Easter and arranging the ecclesiastical year, but that was not accepted for 2 centuries by the British, Great Britain and Ireland, and so Easter was celebrated on the same day in the Western after 1752, but it doesn't solve all the problems. The Eastern churches never did adopt the Gregorian calendar, and they commemorate Easter on a Sunday either preceding or following the date observed in the West. And occasionally the dates coincide by coincidence in 1865 and 1963. In 1928, the British Parliament enacted a measure allowing the Church of England to commemorate Easter on the first Sunday after the second Saturday in April. All these formulas designed to avoid encountering the Jewish Passover, which of course is what it's all about. And so, despite all these steps, the confusion continues, and Easter is labeled in most encyclopedias as a movable feast to hide this confusion. So that's the Quartodecimans controversy. We understand, if you understand the Bible, Jesus was crucified on Passover. We need to understand when Passover is. It's very explicit in the biblical text. And of course, the resurrection 3 days. Well, that leads to another issue. Did it occur on a Friday or a Wednesday? We speak of Good Friday. That's a church tradition. And there are many good scholars that still defend a Friday, but let's talk about that a little bit. There are at least 3 reasons that many serious scholars of the Scriptures believe it could not have been on a Friday. Very likely it was a Wednesday, for 3 reasons. In Matthew 12, verse 40, it indicates Jesus himself, in his own words, said there would be 3 days and 3 nights that he would be in the belly of the earth. And it's hard to get 3 days and 3 nights between a Friday and a Sunday. And there are many amusing anecdotes I could incorporate, but we're tight for time, so I'll spare you those. But moving on. In John chapter 12, first verse, it indicates that Jesus traveled from Jericho to Bethany 6 days before Passover. That tells us that Passover could not have been on a Friday, because that would have made Jesus travel more than a Sabbath day's journey. It's almost 20 miles from Jericho to Bethany. That's a clue that Passover was not on a Friday. But also, most of the confusion occurs because of mistranslation of the first verse of Matthew 28. It's when the Sabbaths were passed. That's a plural term in the Greek. There are more than one Sabbath between Passover and that Sunday morning. And most people don't realize that Shabbat is the 7th day of the week, but there are also 7 high Sabbaths throughout the year, one of which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which occurred between Passover and that Sunday morning. So that's another indication that the crucifixion could not happen on a Friday. It really derives from a misunderstanding of the translation of Matthew 28:1. But so let's take a look at the final week. Friday, he's at Bethany. Saturday is the triumphal entry that we talk about. This is by one reckoning. There's many good scholars have slightly different reckonings. Sunday, the fig tree is cursed. Monday, the conspirators' council. Tuesday night is the Last Supper or the Last Seder. And he's crucified between the evenings. Bear in mind that Passover starts at sundown on Tuesday and goes till sundown on Wednesday, and he's crucified, in effect, Wednesday afternoon by this reckoning, if it's correct. And we have the crucifixion on a Wednesday, Feast of Unleavened Bread the following day. The women prepare the spices on Friday, and of course, they rest on Shabbat. And it's after the Sabbaths, plural, that Matthew talks about, that we have, of course, the Sunday discovery of the empty tomb. Rabbis would say that he actually was resurrected Saturday night, as we would call it, but discovered, of course, Sunday morning. Whatever. In any case, there's a couple of other issues to be aware of as we get into the details. Who is calling the shots? It's not his adversaries. They had not planned to do this on a feast day for fear of the Romans. Why did they do it? Because Jesus forced them to. At the Last Supper, he announces he's going to be betrayed. That puts Judas on the spot. He's got a fish or a cut bait, as we call it. So who is calling the shots? Jesus himself is calling the shots. There is another issue that we should talk about, and that's the manner of death. Satan's strategy would have been to get what they call in the Torah a righteous death. That means he should have been killed by stoning, as far as Satan would have preferred. But contrary to that, he is obviously crucified, a form of execution that had not been invented, but for about 60 years prior. It was prophesied over 700 years earlier in the Scripture, and we'll take a look at that. And the way we'll look at some of these things is to take a quick snapshot, as best we can with the time we have, to talk about the prelude to the resurrection, obviously, including the Last Supper. We'll touch on the Upper Room Discourse, what happened in Gethsemane, the arrest, and so forth. 6 trials that we'll summarize, and then, of course, the crucifixion itself that I'm sure we're familiar with. To look at the final week carefully, you really should take the time to compare the accounts that are in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They all comment on aspects, and they all include some things the others miss. And of course, that final week starts with the triumphal entry, which we find recorded in Matthew 21, Mark 11, Luke 19, and John 12. Very crucial material. I assume it's familiar to most of you if you've done your homework on Daniel chapter 9 and so forth. So that whole area I encourage you to study if it's not familiar to you. But obviously we go from there to what's called the Olivet Discourse, which occurs in Matthew 24 and Mark 13. It's a misunderstanding to assume that Luke 21 is the Olivet Discourse. It's a very similar but different presentation to a different audience with different emphasis. But that's a whole study to undertake on your own. That brings us to the part that we'll start looking at more closely, the events that start with the Last Seder, the Last Supper, as we would call it, but it was a Seder as far as the Jews concerned, a Passover Seder. And that's recorded in Matthew 26, and we'll use that as our backbone, but we'll pick up a few insights from Mark 14 and Luke 22, and certainly from John 13 to 18. John doesn't talk much about, he doesn't cover the same ground as Matthew, Mark, and Luke does, but he includes a discourse that you need to study carefully because he gives us profound insights and the true prayer, the prayer between him and the Father, that deserves very careful study. And from there we'll go to the crucifixion itself, which are the following chapters in each case, and that will set the stage for part 2, where we'll deal with the resurrection in the next session. Matthew 26 predicts the suffering and death. He's anointed at Bethany. Judas betrays him. There's the Passover meal during which the Lord's Supper is instituted. And then they go to the Garden of Gethsemane, where there's prayer and the arrest, and he's accused. And then there's the denial of Peter. Matthew 26 is a primary chronicle here. Let's just take a look at it. It came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, you know that after 2 days, the feast of the Passover, the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. They then assembled together the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. Caiaphas was the Jewish appointee. The Jews really honored Annas. Annas was not official, but the one the Jews looked to. Caiaphas had the franchise from the Romans. But anyway, notice the next verse, verse 4 and 5. They consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. That was the plan. But notice this. And they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. That would bring the Romans on their neck, and they didn't want to have that happen. So it was not their plan to do this on any feast day, and we're facing the most serious, the most popular, one of the 3 compulsory feasts of the year, Passover. That was not the plan, but Jesus is calling the shots, not them, interestingly enough. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said to them, what will ye give me? And I will deliver him unto you. They covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver, and from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. He wasn't planning to do it. Jesus forced him to fish or cut bait at the Last Supper. Zechariah 11 predicts all this, interestingly enough. In Zechariah 11, some 5 centuries earlier, is written, I said unto them, if ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And then there's an interesting prophecy. The Lord said unto me, cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized out of them. And Zechariah says, I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. One of these interesting enigmas tucked away in the book of Zechariah. Passover, of course, was predicted way back in the Akedah in Genesis 22, where Abram's offering Isaac. God will provide himself a lamb. Abraham knew he was acting out prophecy. He named the place that way. John the Baptist introduces Jesus Christ publicly when the whole ministry starts twice. He says, behold the Lamb that taketh away the sin of the world. That's a Jewish title. Jesus Christ's destiny was to be a lamb offered on your behalf and mine. It wasn't a tragedy, it was an achievement. And there's all kinds of anticipatory symbolisms, the leaven, the not of bone broken, and so forth. We won't try to develop that all here. But even the timing, you'll discover the timing of our new beginning in Christ is on the anniversary of Noah's new beginning on the planet Earth. And you begin, as you study the Scripture, you quickly discover that every detail there is an elegant tapestry by design, and Christ's crucifixion being the capstone of all of this. But moving on. Now the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came, that's a term they use collectively for that group of feasts that we're dealing with, saying unto him, where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? And he said, go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, the master saith, my time is at hand, I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. All this echoes, if you will, prearrangements. And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready for the Passover. And when even was come, they sat down with the 12, and as they did it, he said, verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. Get the picture. Judas wasn't planning it. Suddenly, he's on the spot. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto them, Lord, is it I? And he answered and said, he that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. He identifies Judas. Judas has got a problem. He's got a fish or gut bait, as we would say. If he's going to do it, he's got to do it right now, because the word is out. So he's got to split and make arrangements that they had not anticipated. And Jesus goes on, he says, the Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? And he said, you said it. Thou hast said. In fact, one of the other records says, he said, what thou doest, do quickly. Who's in charge here? So they had not planned to take him on a feast day for fear of the Romans. We just saw that in Matthew 26, verse 5. And this is the biggest feast day of the year. Over 1 million inhabitants visiting this. The Romans are nervous because they don't want they don't care what happens as long as it's peaceful. An uproar is is the way their report card was measured. This timing was controlled by Jesus Christ. He put Judas on the spot. And Judas had arrangements to make. He had a split, because he had to get to the high priest, make sure he was available. They had to muster the troops for the arrest. They had a schedule. You can't just go to Pilate. They had to make arrangements, political arrangements, to have a meeting with Pilate for reasons I'll explain shortly. And even at the Gethsemane, during the arrest, you'll notice Jesus is calling the shots. You're seeking me, let these go their way. He's giving the orders. It's interesting to recognize who's really in charge here. Moving on to Matthew 26. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, drink ye all of it. For this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. And instituting what we all recognize is communion. That bread and wine wasn't an afterthought. That was what Melchizedek offered Abraham back in Genesis 14. That was Joseph's dream, if you recall. Remember the wine steward and the baker. And those prophecies back in Genesis 40 echo what's coming here in advance. And the bread of life discourse that Jesus gave back in John 6. The wine at Cana in John 2. And in Exodus chapter 6, when God is giving his command to Moses, says, wherefore say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord. And I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rid you out of their bondage. I will redeem you with a stretched out arm and with great judgments. And I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a God, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. This is what's leading up to the institution of Passover in the first place. And because of these commands in the Torah, I will bring you out, I will rid you of the bondage, I'll redeem you, and I'll take you. This gives labels to 4 cups that are used in Passover. In any Jewish home that does a formal Passover, there are 4 cups, and those cups have names. They have labels. They have a role. And it's interesting that we know from the Scripture that Jesus institutes the Lord's Supper with a third of those 4. And I will redeem you. He doesn't finish, because he's not going to touch the 4th cup until we're all together with him. Very interesting. There's an unfinished cup to be shared, and that's part of the program here. We're not going to take the time to go into John's account of all of this, but John, from 13 to 18, has what we call the upper room discourse, and you want to study that in the context of that evening, because John gives us insights the others don't. And one of the things that in that discourse you don't want to miss is the announcement of what we call the rapture, or the harpazo in the Greek. Jesus said, let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. Notice that, and he goes on, he has you. It's personal. And it's directed to you and I. You and me, each of us. Okay, blessed hope. There are many mansions. He's preparing a place for us. He'll return for us, where we will be where he is forever. That's the promise. These are very precious promises. I couldn't just gloss over even this quick summary. I couldn't gloss over that. He will return for us, the harpazo. He will snatch us out forcibly. Paul details this in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15. And we'll look at one of those later. The phrase come again is used 4 times. At the rapture, spiritual presence, indwelling the believer, post-resurrection ministry. All alluded to in John 14, worth your careful study. And there's a new thing he's announcing here, that there's going to be a man in heaven. Jesus became a man forever. He's not just a man for 33 and a half years. There's a man sitting on the throne of God as we speak. The redemption of the purchased possession in heaven by better sacrifices are expressed in Hebrews 9, Ephesians 1, and Colossians 1, and elsewhere. Let's move on. In Matthew 26, then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, Sit ye here, while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter and two of the sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. In fact, it's Dr. Luke that tells us he was so heavy he actually sweated blood. That's not a layman's term, that's a doctor's term. There's a medical term for that. But anyway, then saith he unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me. He went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. He cometh unto his disciples, find them asleep. Saith unto Peter, What? Could ye not watch with me 1 hour? It's interesting, they could not watch for 1 hour. The adversaries are up all night in the trials. Anyway, watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again a second time and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. He's going to do that 3 times. And that's an important thing to understand. If it was any other way for you and I to enter heaven, that prayer wasn't answered. There's no other way. He came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and he left them and went away again and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same words. 3 times. He asked to get off the hook if there's any other way this could be accomplished. No, that's his mission. That's what he was committed to. Then cometh he to his disciples, and saith unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's be going. He is at hand that doth betray me. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and the elders of the people. So they've gotten their act together, presumably. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Hold him fast. Forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master! And kissed him. Notice it doesn't say Lord, but anyway. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew a sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. We know that's Peter. We even know the guy's name, but that's from the other gospel accounts. Then said Jesus unto him, Put up again thy sword in its place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? Jesus is going willingly, is the point. That's his mission. How then shall the scriptures be fulfilled, that thus it must be? And at that same hour said Jesus to the multitudes, Are ye come out against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and ye laid no hold on me. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. And they that laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him afar off unto the high priest's palace, and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. And now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At last came 2 false witnesses and said, The fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? But Jesus held his peace, and the high priest answered and said to him, I adjure thee by the living God that thou shalt tell us whether thou be Christ, the Son of God. So he's under oath. And the oath itself is recorded elsewhere in detail. This is the formal oath that was challenged with. I adjure thee by the living God, in whose office I stand, under whose power we all are, before whom thou standest, who knowest the truth and judgest between us and thee, that thou tellest this holy Sanhedrin now hear as before God the truth. And so he was required by law to respond. Leviticus 5:1 and 1 Kings 22 and elsewhere. So Jesus said, You said it, buddy. And Jesus said unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. Well, that did it for him. You know, it's interesting how many people say, well, Jesus never claimed to be God. Isn't that ridiculous? They've never read any of the Gospels to say that makes such an absurd statement. That's what he claimed to be. That's the reason they crucified him. Then the high priest rent his clothes, which is against the law, by the way, saying, he hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. What think ye? And he answered and said, he is guilty of death. Then did they spit in his face and buffeted him, and others smote him in the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy unto us, thou Christ, who is he that smote thee? Now Peter's outside, without the palace, and a damsel came to him, saying, thou also wast with Jesus of Galilee. And he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. And when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him, and said unto him that were there, this fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, surely thou art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee. They could tell a Galilean accent. They spotted him. And he began to curse and swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. And he was reminded that's exactly what Jesus had prophesied earlier. Remember the word of Jesus which said unto him, before the cock crow thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. Can you imagine? Peter, bold Peter, aggressive Peter, denying our Lord. And that's going to get dealt with later by the Sea of Galilee. There's some lessons from Peter we don't want to pass without mentioning. The danger of self-confidence. He should have been praying, not sleeping, to avoid all of this. The consequences of prayerlessness. Could he not watch with 1 hour? The perils of companionship with the wicked. He shouldn't have even been there to get in these kinds of encounters. And of course, the influence of the fear of man. He didn't have the guts to stand up and say, yes, I'm with him. Proverbs 20, the fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe. How tragic that we got some lessons there from Peter. Let's move on. Jesus' death was no accident. His words at the Last Supper make no sense at all if Jesus was not the master of his own death. Indeed he was. He maintained sovereign, premeditated, precise mastery, not just at the Lord's Supper, but also even in the garden and following. A God who is in control when the foundations of his own earthly existence are crumbling is a God who can be trusted to sustain us when it appears that our life is tumbling in. Lots of lessons here. Let's keep moving. Let's pick it up in John's narrative. After he did his upper room discourse, when Jesus had spoken these words, he went out forth with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden into which he entered, and disciples, and Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oftentimes resorted thither with his disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh hither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Jesus, knowing all things that they should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, whom seek ye? And he answered, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said unto them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with him. And as soon as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backward and fell to the ground. And he asked them again, whom seek ye? They said, Jesus of Nazareth. He answered, I've told you that I am he. If there ye seek me, let these go their way. Notice who's in charge. Notice who's calling the shots. He's giving the orders. Jesus is. That the saying might be fulfilled which he spake, of them which thou gavest me, have I lost none. That's exciting. Remember that. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. His servant's name was Malchus. And Jesus said unto Peter, put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? Then the band of the captain officers took Jesus, bound him, and led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, and the ones the Jews honored. Caiaphas, the Roman appointee, which was the high priest that same year. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. A very famous prophecy that was far more true than Caiaphas had any idea. Annas, of course, he was deposed by Pilate's predecessor, but he's still very influential. He's the vice president of the Sanhedrin, and he's patriarch of the family that held the office of high priest as late as AD 62, including 5 sons and a son-in-law. He had a large family. But anyway, we'll go on. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest. We suspect it was John, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without. And then went out that other disciple, which is known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. And then saith the damsel that kept the door, Peter, art thou not one of this man's disciples? He says, I am not. And the servant's officer stood there, and this again, this is a recounting of Peter's denials. They made a fire of coals. It was cold. They warmed themselves. Peter stood with them and warmed themselves. And the high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples of his doctrine. Jesus answered and said, I spoke openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort, and in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. When he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. If well, why smitest thou me? Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas, the high priest. Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. And he said, Art thou not one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, saith, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? Peter denied again, and immediately, of course, the cock crew. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, for it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall. See, that's Gentile ground, this Roman ground, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. This is really fascinating. It's such a farce. They have false witnesses that they've mustered here. They're violating all the laws in the book, and yet they don't dare cross the threshold for fear they would mar their eligibility to observe Passover. The quorum was 23. A majority of 2 is required. So it could be as few as 13 that caused this whole mess from a legal point of view. Now Caiaphas was the Roman appointee. He's appointed each year, and that's in contrast to the law of God, in which the high priest was to serve until death. And many Jews resented the Roman intrusions. They still looked to Annas, not Caiaphas, as the real high priest. That's why you got both of them in the act here. Both of them will eventually stand before Christ in judgment. That's going to be an interesting scene. But his real name was Joseph, and he had a reputation for intrigue, bribery, and love of money, and what have you. There are 6 trials involved. We obviously won't detail them all, but they are in the Scripture. There are 3 Jewish trials, between Annas, then through Caiaphas, then formally before the Sanhedrin, that are recorded in John and Matthew, respectively. Then they don't have the authority for capital punishment. I'll explain that in a minute. So that leads to 3 Roman trials before Pilate, until Pilate discovers he can pawn it off maybe on a Galilean, Herod. That doesn't work. It comes back to Pilate, and Pilate has to deal with it. So we've got 6 trials. Now, what's interesting about this, self-incrimination was prohibited by law. Yeah, that's the way they indicted him. Virtually all aspects of all 6 trials that Jesus endured were illegally administered. The religious trial was over. The next step was the criminal trial before the civil authorities. Only they could execute him for death by a method that had been invented a century earlier and prophesied 7 centuries earlier. Very strange, very interesting. The binding of a prisoner before he was condemned was unlawful unless resistance was offered or expected. And of course, Jesus offered none. It was illegal for judges to participate in the arrest of the accused. They arranged it. There were no legal transactions, including a trial, could be conducted at night. That's Jewish law. The arrest was effected through the agency of an informant and traitor. That was illegal. While an acquittal could be pronounced the same day, any other verdict required a majority of 2 and had to come on a subsequent day. That was their law. That was all obviously ignored. No prisoner could be convicted on his own evidence against the law. It was the duty of the judge to see that the interest of the accused was fully protected. No, it was what we would call a kangaroo court from day one. Preliminary hearings before a magistrate were completely foreign to the Jewish legal systems. They didn't have preliminary hearings. The judges sought false witnesses against Jesus. That was against the law. In a Jewish court, the accused was to be assumed innocent until proved guilty by 2 or more witnesses. That obviously was not operative here. The Jews failed to find 2 witnesses agreeing. They even then couldn't agree. They had to get him on his own testimony. When the witnesses first disagreed, the prisoner should have been released. That was the procedure. The trial under Caiaphas took place in his home rather than the council chamber where it should have been held. The council lacked civil authority to condemn a man to death. That was a Roman prerogative, and that's what they're going to try to invoke here. It was illegal to conduct a session of the court on a feast day. It just adds up on and on. There are books written on this. I've just given you the highlights. A guilty verdict was rendered without evidence. The balloting was illegal. It should have been done by roll with the youngest voting first. typical wardroom procedure in the Navy, let alone in the... Anyway, the sentence was finally passed in the palace of the high priest, but the law demanded it be pronounced in the temple in the hall of hewn stone. There were all these procedures that were ignored. This was a railroad job, obviously. The high priest rends his garment. That's expressly prohibited in Leviticus 21:10. And if he did not have his priestly robe on, he couldn't have put Christ under oath. So we know he had his priestly robe, but it was the priestly robe that he tore. That's against the law too. So it compounds. 6 trials. Annas, Caiaphas, and Sanhedrin, then the Roman trials before Pilate, before Herod, and then again before Pilate. So we'll take a look at the Roman trials. Picking up in Matthew 27, when the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away to deliver him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Now, why is all that going on? Because the scepter had departed from Judah. Archelaus was the second son of Herod the Great. And I won't get into all this. His older son was murdered by Herod the Great along with other family members. That's the whole thing in Josephus. And his mother was never accepted, a lot of issues. But after the death of Herod, Archelaus had been placed over Judea as ethnarch by Caesar Augustus. He was broadly rejected. He was dethroned and banished in 6-7 AD. Get the dates here. It's very interesting. He was replaced by a Roman procurator called Coponius. And the legal power of the Sanhedrin was immediately restricted, and the adjudication of capital cases was lost. That was standard Roman policy that Coponius instituted. And this is all in Josephus' War of the Jews. And it's also recorded in the Jerusalem Talmud. Now, when members of the Sanhedrin found themselves deprived of their right over life and death, this is now 6 or 7 AD, this is a couple of decades earlier, they covered their heads with ashes and their bodies with sackcloth, and they bemoaned the following: Woe unto us, for the scepter has departed from Judah, and the Messiah has not come. This is recorded in the Babylonian Talmud. They actually thought the word of God was broken, because Genesis 49:10 said the scepter shall not depart from Judah until the Messiah comes. And they saw the scepter departing, which is indicative of having lost the capital punishment. What they didn't realize is that while they were parading themselves around town in sackcloth, bemoaning their belief that the word of God had been broken, there was a young man growing up in Nazareth in a carpenter shop. Pontius Pilate served as 6th Roman procurator from AD 26 to AD 36, after which he was recalled to Rome, by the way, and passed out of official history. He was hated by Orthodox Jews and never really understood them. And a plaque bearing his name was found in Caesarea that you can visit when you visit Israel. You'll see it. But he ruled Judea with a reckless and arbitrary fashion. He displeased the Romans too, by the way. And he was deposed by Vitellius, sent to Rome, tried under Caligula. There is a tradition that he killed himself, but the Coptic Jews have a different orientation. They believe he actually became a Christian. So what's that based on? Scholars argue about it. We won't take the time. I think it's kind of interesting. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he was Christian, as we'll see hints of that brewing in the things that confronted him. Getting back to Matthew, then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed innocent blood. Blood is always associated with silver in the scripture. They said, what is that to us? See thou to that. See thou to that. And he cast down the piece of silver in the temple, departed, and went and hanged himself. And the chief priest took the silver pieces and said, it's not lawful to put them into the treasury because it is the price of blood. But they had good CPAs on staff. They took counsel and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. See, they couldn't put it in the treasury, but they could prepay anticipated expenses with it. And the temple was responsible for strangers that died in the precincts, so they had every year some of those to pay for. There was a bargain piece of ground they could buy for a potter's field. It was a potter's field. So they took the money to buy that as their way of getting around the prohibition of putting it in the treasury. Wherefore that field is called the field of blood unto this day. Now what's fascinating about this is back there in Zechariah, we read this interesting prophecy in chapter 11. He said, son of them, you think good, give me my price, if not forbear. And they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said unto me, cast it into the potter, a goodly price that I was prized out of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. And I think this is rather interesting. We got the price, 30 pieces of silver. We got the location of the transaction in the temple, in the house of the Lord. Who ends up with the money? the guy that owned the field, the potter. All that's prophesied 5 centuries before the fact. The precision is astonishing. But we'll move on. See, this is even alluded to. This is confirmed in Matthew. This was fulfilled by that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value, and gave them to the potter's field as the Lord had appointed me. And Jeremy the prophet was a collection of scrolls that included Zechariah, which is a lot of people stumble on that detail, but let's move on. Now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity. This is the book of Acts summarizing this. And falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it was known unto all the dwellers in Jerusalem, insomuch that field is called in the proper tongue Aceldama, which is to say the field of blood. So that's well documented. Pilate has a number of interviews with Christ, 4 on the inside and 3 on the outside, 7 encounters that are summarized primarily in the Gospel of John. Pilate tries again every artifact known to a bureaucrat to try to get out from under this situation that he's been maneuvered into. Pilate went out to them and said, what accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto them, if he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered up to thee. Kind of impudent response. And then said Pilate unto them, take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said to him, it's not lawful for us to put any man to death. See, that's the real issue. Now he tries to get out from under this a number of times. He says, you judge him. And then he announces him innocent. Pilate announces him innocent. The personal representative of the ruler of the world pronounces him innocent. The Jews, though, talk him into substituting Barabbas for the one to get out from under it, he's going to offer as a holiday celebration someone to set free. They insist they pick this other guy rather than Jesus. Then he tries to abuse him enough so he'd win the sympathy of the crowd, and that doesn't work. Play on their pity. And then he said, behold your king. And it doesn't work, obviously. But anyway, continuing here, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. And when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. And Pilate said unto him, hearest thou how many things they witness against thee? And he answered him never a word, insomuch that the governor marveled greatly. He didn't defend himself. Didn't even try. That was also prophesied, as we'll see in Isaiah 53. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, art thou the king of the Jews? That caught his ear, huh? He answered him, sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it of thee? Pilate said, am I a Jew? Thine own nation and chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered unto the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, art thou a king then? Jesus answered, thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice. Then Pilate's famous, rhetorical, cynical question. What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said to them, I find in him no fault at all. See, Pilate recognizes that this guy's been delivered up for envy. But the crowds out there, bribed of course. And they were the more fierce, saying, he stirreth up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. Now when Pilate heard Galilee, he asked whether or not this is a Galilean. See, he's got a bureaucratic exit here, maybe because Herod's in charge of Galilee. Let's give him the problem. As soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was at Jerusalem at that time. How convenient. Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas was the son of Herod the Great, and Malchus a Samaritan woman, so he's never really accepted by the Jews for lots of different reasons. Half Edomian, half Samaritan. The Edomites were the enemies of Israel, you understand. Without a drop of Jewish blood in his veins. So Galilee of the Gentiles seemed to fit dominion for that kind of a prince. He ruled as Tetrarch of Galilee from 4 BC to about 39 AD. When Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he was desirous to see him of long season, because he had heard of the many things of him. He hoped to have seen some miracles done by him. He's looking for entertainment here, huh? Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. The chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod with his men of war set him at naught, mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. The same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. So there's all kinds of speculation about that. See, Pilate was using a bureaucratic artifact here. It didn't work. But it did bridge the chasm between them. Both of them would be shortly stripped of all their power, and they both would die, apparently, in shameful exile. But we'll move on. Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, said to them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accuse him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. See, for of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. That was a tradition that he was following, hoping this would work. Now at that feast the governor was wont to release to the people a prisoner whom they would, but they had then a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said to them, Whom will ye that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him. It's interesting that Pilate would use the term Messiah. Christ is a title. Jesus, who is called Christ or called the Messiah. That's an interesting phrase for Pilate to use. And he realized that he was deliberately maneuvered in the spot because of envy. When he was set down at the judgment seat, his wife sent to him and said, Have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. Can you imagine? Pilate's got a spot. He's got a jurisdictional problem he's got to deal with somehow. He wants to wash his hands of this whole thing, which he does literally shortly. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude, bribes were passed obviously, that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. And the governor answered and said to them, Whither of the twain will ye that I release unto you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said unto them, What shall I do then with Jesus who is called Christ? They all said unto him, Let him be crucified. So you got a mob rule situation. The governor said, Why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, and that was the fear of the Roman administrator. He just wanted his report card back in Rome will be, can he keep the thing under control? He saw a tumult was made. He took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children. And then released he Barabbas unto them, and then he scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. You know, it's really tragic how the early church attempted to pin the entire rose on the Jews. John, in his gospel, when he speaks of the Jews, he's alluding to the leadership of the Jews. And it's tragic that this anti-Semitism in the early church had its roots in this idea of trying to blame this whole thing on the Jews. He was murdered by Gentiles under Gentile authority. So if you want to blame someone for the death of Christ, blame me. It was my fault. My sins put him on that cross. Let's take a look at Barabbas briefly. Let's not pass on this one. He stood under the righteous condemnation of the law. He was guilty and he knew he was. Everybody knew he was. He knew the one who was to take his cross and take his place was innocent. He knew that. Everybody did. He knew that Jesus Christ was for him a true substitute. They're going to switch places, in effect. He knew that he had done nothing to merit going free while another took his place. Get the picture of Barabbas, the predicament he's in. They're changing places. The murderer's bonds, curse, disgrace, and mortal agony were transferred to the righteous Jesus. While the liberty, innocence, safety, and well-being of the Nazarene became the lot of the murderer. Do you see the switch? Do you see the contrast? A mutual exchange of position. Barabbas is installed with all the rights and privileges of Jesus Christ, while the latter enters upon all the infamy and horror of the rebel's position. The delinquent's guilt and cross become the lot of the just one, and the civil rights and immunities of the latter are now the property of the delinquent. See the reversal. Where are you and I in this picture? We're in Barabbas' shoes. He took our place. He took our place. As you watch this drama, recognize where you're at and where he's at. He is in our place. That is Jesus. Then Pilate took therefore Jesus and scourged him, and the soldiers platted a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe, and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they smote him with their hands. This is the John recording. And then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus to the common hall, gathered unto him a whole band of soldiers. They stripped him, put on him a scarlet robe. When they platted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand. They bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Let's pick up the thread with John. Pilate therefore went forth again and said unto them, "Behold, I bring him forth unto you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him." This is a repeat. We're just going to recount the ground here a little bit. Then came Jesus forth, wearing the crown of thorns, the purple robe, and Pilate said unto him, "Behold the man!" And when the chief priests therefore and the officers saw him and cried out, saying, "Crucify him, crucify him," Pilate said unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him." And we have this famous painting by Antonio Ciceri called Ecce Homo that captures the flavor of the moment, indeed, as Pilate tries to maneuver a way out of this predicament. The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God." When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he became more afraid. I can imagine. What if he's right? He went again to the judgment hall and said unto Jesus, "Whence art thou?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate said unto him, "Speakest not unto me? Knowest not that I have the power to crucify thee and have the power to release thee?" And Jesus said, "Thou couldst have no power at all against thee, except to be given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin." And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, "If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend." Unusual argument for a Jew to give to a Roman. "Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar." That's the kind of accusation Pilate could not afford to ignore. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in the place called in the pavement, but in Hebrew, the Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover about the 6th hour, and he saith unto the Jews, "Behold your king." But they cried out, away with him, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief answered, "We have no king but Caesar." That's a remarkable remark for the chief priests. I'll bet you that's the only time they've ever acknowledged that, before or later. Hosea has an interesting prophecy in chapter 3. "For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice." What is this talking about? After 70 AD, isn't it? "And without an image, and without an ephod, and without a teraphim. Afterward shall the children of Israel return, and seek the Lord their God, and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days." Interesting prophecy in Hosea. Hosea is full of some real insights. Getting back to John, they delivered him therefore to be crucified. They took Jesus, led him away, and bearing his cross went forth into a place called in the place of the skull, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Golgotha. And so we go from the Last Supper in Gethsemane to the crucifixion scene. And if you go to Israel, this is the way it looks today. There is an area that looks like a skull. That's not the reason we believe this is Golgotha. Many people misunderstand. There's other reasons for this. If you take a topological map of Mount Moriah, which is a ridge system up between two other mountains, Mount of Olives on the east and Mount Zion on the west. You have Mount Zion and the Turopian Valley originally, Mount of Olives and the Kidron Valley, and the valley, Hinnom Valley at the south. That's the rough topology. But if you follow that ridge system up, it starts about 600 meters above sea level at Ophel to the thrashing floor of Aruna where the temple is, but that's not the peak. That's about 742 meters. You get up to the peak, which is a place called Golgotha. That's where the Akedah took place, where Abram offered Isaac, despite some traditions to the contrary. And we have the peak there. That's where Abram offered Isaac, we believe, and this is also where the crucifixion took place. Now, there are people that have other theories, but it's interesting that Leviticus 1 and Leviticus 6 indicates that all burnt offerings and sin offerings are to be on the north side of the camp. Some people try to they believe it was on the Mount of Olives. We don't hold that view for a number of reasons. This is one of them. And because it should be on all burnt offerings and sin offerings on the north side, outside the camp, without the gate, and it meets all those conditions. When they crucified him with two others, one on either side and Jesus in the midst, the American Medical Association had an extensive description of the death, published in 1986, which is an excerpt from that report. Due the pain endured by the weight of the body hanging from the nails, which damage the medial nerves and tear at the tarsals, the respiratory torture, the cramping, the pleural effusions, concluded that death by crucifixion was in every sense of the word excruciating, literally out of the cross. The word excruciating comes from this manner of death, incidentally. And we could talk more about that, but let's move on. This interesting thing, Pilate wrote a titlan. It's a label on the cross. He wrote it personally, apparently, and put it on the cross, which means he wrote in 3 languages. Interesting administrator. The writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. You and I would miss that except for the leadership, the scribes and Pharisees. Whenever they get upset, that's the Holy Spirit's way of underlining it for you so you don't miss something here. This title then read many of the Jews, for the place where Jesus was crucified was nigh unto the city. It was written in Hebrew and in Greek and in Latin. Okay, here's what he apparently wrote. Yeshua, Hanatzarai, V'melech, HaYehudin. Jesus, the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. That's what he wrote. Now, it's interesting. The chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, write not the King of the Jews, but that he said, I am the King of the Jews. And Pilate said, what I have written, I have written. They want him to change the wording. He wouldn't do it. What's going on here? What he actually says is, what I have written will always remain written. That's what he actually said. That's the proper translation. What's going on here? Pilate's playing a game with them. See, this is the way he wrote it in Hebrew, and he knew this. He knew his people that the Jewish leadership have a fascination with acrostics. There are psalms that are acrostic. They're into acrostics. If you take the acrostics here, the first letter of these 4 words, it spells Yod-He-Vav-He, which is the unpronounceable name of God. He is declaring him Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, and he's ascribing God's name to them. Because he believed that? Not necessarily. He may have done it just out of mischief because he knew this would drive them nuts. And it did. I think that's kind of fun. And yet, maybe he's beginning, there's some clues that cause me to suspect he may have understood far more than we generally give him credit for as time goes on here. Anyway, then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and made 4 parts, to every soldier a part, and also his coat. Now the coat was without seam, woven from top throughout. He said, therefore, let us not rend it. There are 4 guys there. They're dividing this up, right? But to cast lots for it, whose it shall be, that the scripture might be fulfilled. They parted my raiment among them, and for my vesture they did cast lots. These things, therefore, the soldiers did. Now there, but stood by the cross Jesus' mother, his mother's sister, Mary, wife of Cleophas, Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved, he saith to his mother, Woman, behold thy son, pointing to John. And he saith to his disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour the disciple took her unto his own home. Not his own blood half-brothers. He had 4 of them. No, John the Apostle is dealing with here. Interesting for lots of reasons. Then were the 2 thieves crucified, one on the right hand, another on the left, and they passed by, reviled him, wagging their heads, saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. This is all prophesied verbally. Likewise also the chief priests, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others himself, he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. And one of the malefactors which were hanged riled on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us. But the other, answering, rebuked him, saying, Dost thou not fear God, seeing that thou art in the same condemnation? We indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss. And he said to Jesus, Remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that today thou shalt be with me in paradise. Whoo-wee. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land till the 9th hour, and about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Jesus is, and this is commonly reported as Aramaic. It's not, it's Hebrew, but I won't go down all that. Let's just get into the Psalm 22. Jesus is pointing us to a psalm that sounds as if it was dictated while he hung on that cross. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me and from the words of my roaring? Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but thou hearest not, and in the night season am not silent. Jesus said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? It's the only time in history, both before and since, that he didn't call him my Father. Why did he say my God? Because he's in our shoes. He's in our shoes. But thou art holy, only thou that inhabitest the praises of Israel. Our fathers trusted in thee, they trusted in thou didst deliver them. They cried unto thee and were delivered. They trusted in thee, were not confounded. But I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men and despised of the people. All that see me laugh me to scorn. They shoot out the lip and they shake the head, saying, he trusted in the Lord that he should deliver him. Let him deliver him, say he delighted him. It just echoes what was going on. But thou art he that took me out of the womb. Thou didst make me hope when I was upon my mother's breast. I was cast upon thee from the womb. Thou art my God from my mother's belly. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, for there's none to help. Many bulls have compassed me. Strong bulls of Bashan have beset me round. They gaped on me with their mouths as a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaws, and thou hast brought me into the dust of death. For dogs have compassed me. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. Remarkable thing to find in the Psalms some 700-800 years before the fact. I may tell all my bones. They look and stare upon me. They part my garments among them, and they cast lots upon my vesture. The precision here is astonishing. Well, anyway, getting back to Matthew, some of them stood by there and said, hey, this man called for Elias. They misunderstood what he's saying. And straight one of them ran and took a sponge, filled it with vinegar, put it in a reed, gave him to drink, and the rest said, let be, let us see whether Elias come to save him. And Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. It was his initiative. He gave up the ghost. They didn't take it from him. And the Jews, therefore, because it was preparation, the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day. It's not Saturday, it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread that's coming. Besought Pilate that their legs might be broken, that they might be taken away. See, sometimes it could take 3 or 4 days for a guy to die of a crucifixion. So they wanted to speed it up. Then came the soldiers and brake the legs of the first and the other which was crucified with him. This is astonishing. The Roman soldiers tend to obey orders. They were ordered to break the legs. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was dead already. They brake not his legs. Surprising. One of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side. Wonder why. And forthwith there came out blood and water. And he that saw it bare record, and his record is true, and he knoweth that what he saith is true, that ye might believe. These things were done that the scripture might be fulfilled. A bone of him shall not be broken. And another scripture says, they shall look upon him whom they pierced. One's from Zechariah, one's from Exodus 12. In one house shall be eaten, speaking of the Passover lamb, thou shalt not carry aught for the flesh abroad of the house, neither shall ye break a bone of it. That little specification of Passover is in Exodus. It's also in Numbers 9, and it's also in Psalm 34:20. So throughout the Old Testament, it underscores that not one bone is to be broken of the Passover lamb, and he's in that role. Zechariah says, it shall come to pass in that day I come to seek, that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. This is talking about the future. I will pour upon the house of David, upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me, the one whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn from him as one mourneth for his only son, and so forth. The one whom they've pierced. Let's move on. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. The graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared to many. And when the centurion and they that were with him, watching Jesus, saw the earthquake and those things which were done, they feared greatly, saying, truly this was the Son of God. And many women were beholding far off, followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor, also waited for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate, and craved the body of Jesus, which means he must have been next of kin, by the way. And Pilate marveled if he were already dead. And calling unto him the centurion, he asked him whether he had been any while dead. And when he knew it of the centurion, he gave the body to Joseph. I've been informed by a very good source, namely Chuck Smith of Calvary Chapel, that there's an unrecorded conversation between Joseph of Arimathea and Pilate, because Pilate's shocked to encounter Joseph. He says, I don't understand. You've got this brand new tomb for your family, and you're going to give it to this criminal? And Joseph says, oy vey, it's just for the weekend. There's an interesting verse in John 19 that is misunderstood. After this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, for fear of the Jews, besought Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him leave, and he came therefore and took the body of Jesus. The John account mentions that this word secretly. Secretly is an adverb. It turns out that's not an adverb, it's an adjective. In the Greek, there is one letter different that makes it an adjective, not an adverb. What does that mean? He was secreted for fear of the Jews. He was in hiding. That's one of the reasons Pilate's so surprised. He had access to Pilate. That means he's a heavy dude. He had access. But Pilate was surprised. Why? Because he'd been in hiding because his life was at risk. We get that all from one letter that's been missed in the English translation. He was secreted for fear of the Jews. Small point, but it's just another issue. There came also Nicodemus, which at first came to Jesus by night, back in John 3, you recall, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100-pound weight, and they took the body of Jesus, wound it in linen clothes for the spices, as the manner of Jews is to bury. Now the place that he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new sepulchre, wherein was never a man yet laid. Brand new. The owner of the garden area had his own family tomb, never yet used. Apparently Joseph's own tomb. There laid they Jesus, therefore, because of the Jews' preparation day, for the sepulchre was nigh at hand. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean cloth, laid it in his own tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock, and rolled a great stone at the door of the sepulchre, and departed. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Now the next day, that followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that deceiver while he was yet alive. After 3 days I will rise again. That's what he said. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, he has risen from the dead. And get this line. So that the last error will be worse than the first. They recognize this all was a big mistake. But they're anxious that the body not be stolen. That's important. That the Jewish and Roman authorities took all the preparations they could to make sure it wasn't stolen. Pilate said to them, You have your watch. Go your way. Make it as sure as ye can. I love that line. You know what Pilate's saying to them? You have your own watch. You have your watch. Go your way. Make it as sure as you can. Do you hear the cynicism? You get the impression that when Pilate later finds out the body's gone, he's not surprised. You get the impression that he is beginning to suspect that Jesus really is who he claimed to be. That's my guess, just my supposition. Anyway, so they went and they made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. Make it as sure as you can. I love that line. What you want to do at this stage is read Isaiah 53. The Old Testament. Who hath believed our report? To whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, as a root out of the dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised, rejected of men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. And the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shears is dumb, he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from the judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. Interesting verse. He made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. This is an interesting. I've always thought this referred to the two thieves. He made his grave with the wicked. And Andrew Bonar points out in his commentary on Leviticus that this refers to his burial. He made his grave with the wicked. Well, how can he have a holy ground in among the wicked? There's only one way, and that's to be carved out of the stone. It's interesting, Andrew Leviticus, he published his commentary in 1843. The very spot that the criminals were put to death was the spot where Joseph's new tomb was hewn out of the rock. The stony sides of the tomb, the new tomb, the clean place where Jesus was laid, were part of the malefactor's hill. His dead body is with the rich man and with the wicked in the hour of his death. His grave is the property of a rich man, and yet the rocks which form the partition between his tomb and that of the other Calvary malefactors are themselves part of Golgotha. So it's interesting, Bonar describes the garden tomb in detail in his commentary. And if you've been there, it's very, 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 very vividly described. The shocker to me is that Andrew Bonar's commentary was published in 1846. The garden tomb was not discovered by General Charles Gordon until 40 years later, 1883. And Bonar describes it from the text in Leviticus, not because he's seen it. It's astonishing. Anyway, Isaiah continues, "Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see the travail of his soul and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities." Astonishing piece. So here's a quick summary of the events of the day. Jesus arrives at Golgotha. He refuses the offer of wine, myrrh, and so forth. He's nailed to the cross between two thieves. The first cry from the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Then the garments are allocated. They cast lots and so forth. The Jews mock Jesus. He converses with the two thieves. His second cry, "You will be with me in paradise." The third cry, "Woman, behold your son, behold thy mother." Darkness from noon to 3 p.m. The fourth cry, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" The fifth cry, "I am thirsty." He drank wine and vinegar. His sixth cry, "It is finished." Tetelestai, paid in full, is what it translates. "My Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." He commits himself. He dismisses the spirit. The temple curtain is torn. The Roman soldiers declare, "Surely this was the Son of God." There are 7 cries from the cross that we've reviewed here, interestingly enough. Salvador Dali paints a 4-dimensional Hinton cube, recognizing that we're dealing with a hyper-dimensional space, and there's a whole study that we'll talk about in the next session about that. And so we'll go from the crucifixion to the resurrection that we celebrate on what so many people call Easter morning, Sunday morning. So what we'll talk about next time is the resurrection as it's recorded in the 4 Gospels and also amplified in what Paul would argue is the most important chapter in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 15.